Hi, folks. Welcome to InDIGnation, DigBoston's weekly news and public affairs show. I'm Jason Pramas, Dig's executive editor. And this week we have a couple of great interviews for you with Cambridge Health Alliance nurse Susan Wright-Thomas and presidential candidate Vermin Supreme, plus much, much more, starting with my partner, Chris Faraone, who's going to get started with this week's news article roundup. Chris.
Thanks, Jason. Well, I think it goes without saying that I have to start with reopening. It's the big story. Everyone was waiting for Governor Charlie Baker's big announcement, and we finally got it. Not too many surprises there. Of course, you go to DigBoston.com, and we tell you exactly what's opening and what isn't. You got your beaches, parks, fishing, hunting, a lot of your Memorial Day stuff, office and lab space. Needless to say, essential businesses are still open. Cannabis shops are finally opening on May 25th. You can find out all about that at DigBoston.com. Also, of course, goes without saying, all that stuff's happening, but not everybody's happy. So Jason and I are going to talk about that in a second. A lot of people thinking the governor shouldn't have opened up as much as he did, and other people saying everything should be opened up. You got a lot of restaurateurs, for example, saying that restaurants should be at 100% capacity. We'll get there in a second. Next up, I want to let people know about a story, really incredible reporting by Iñaki Estivalis, who's just been doing these amazing pieces on people who have been working through the pandemic in really difficult situations. This one's about the Boston Medical Center domestic violence program. It's about how they operate to an extent, and really just about what people have done in this situation. Domestic violence has been on the rise ever since the quarantine. A lot of ugly situations, and this really paints them. A tough read, but a really important one. And that's kind of the same for the next one here. This one's by Jordan Frias, fantastic reporter. This is about shelter workers at the Pine Street Inn in particular. We've read a lot about shelters. We've written a lot about the population of people who don't have a place to stay during the coronavirus pandemic. But personally, I haven't seen a lot about what the people who actually work in the shelters are going through. It's really tough. Some of the people that we spoke with have actually been staying, had cots in their own offices for weeks at a time, and we're catching them now months into this, and some of them actually have returned home. It's not quite as bad as it was their situation at the beginning, but nevertheless, really phenomenal read. Next up, I want to talk about Zoom Court. Zoom Court is exactly what you would think it is. It is your life on the line, but you're online. So this one's by Jean Traunstein, phenomenal prison reporter, has just been doing great work. I think she's done 5 long-form pieces about what's going on in Massachusetts prisons since this all started. Needless to say, this is a population that is mostly ignored, and this is really worsening a situation as far as a lot of the advocates that Jean spoke with are concerned. Imagine you're on Zoom. The judge is blurry. You're blurry. The communication isn't really happening, and really whether you stay in prison or get let out because of coronavirus concerns, that's all on the line. Really. Tough stuff. Now, those were four pretty hard stories. We're going to lighten it up a little bit for the next one. There was the first concert back. This one took place at the Tupelo Music Hall in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Noah Schaefer did a phenomenal piece here, really. It's not just about this first show, but it's about what live music could possibly look like in the future, but even this summer. At Tupelo, really, standards were pretty strict. People were allowed to tailgate, but they weren't allowed to, say, visit the tailgate next door, things like that. Gloves, masks, bring your own booze, things of that sort. We're going to see a lot about it, but let's talk about reopening, the people who are happy, the people who aren't happy, certainly a lot of people in both camps. Jason and I have been talking about this issue quite a bit in the newsroom, or our virtual newsroom. Here we are. So I don't know, Jason, hey. Music's starting up. You got, we haven't even talked about restaurants. Let's leave that till next week. But really, I'm not necessarily trying to play it down the middle here, but really are there 2 camps? Are there more than 2 camps? What do you think?
About reopening the state, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. What camp do we put ourselves in? We're running DigBoston, we're small business owners, right? And obviously our business was affected by businesses shutting down. So it is a concern that we do get the economy moving again, right? On the other hand, certainly in our circles, at Dig, all our reporters, us, our paramount concern has been public health, right? We don't want to see the curve, the so-called curve of infection with coronavirus, and you know, people coming down with it and getting COVID-19, you know, the disease from coronavirus. We don't want to see that going up. We want to see it continuing the curve to flatten, the numbers to go from being flat to down, and then you know, then we can start thinking about reopening up more and more. Although we're certainly hearing that there's going to be another wave, you know, come fall and winter, and we may have to shut right down again. So I mean, it's tricky, but I think we've generally come down on the side of caution, and that we've generally said, look, you know, we want everything to open up like everybody else. We want to get out more ourselves, but how can we do that as early as the governor's been talking about? We're concerned about it.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, you mentioned some of the news that, you know, it's really looking like there are going to be surges, particularly in a bunch of southern states. And
Oh
you know,
yeah.
I was reading about it all day yesterday. But at the same time, it's easy to point our fingers at the south of the Mason-Dixon line. But you know, you go outside in Boston, look at New York City. Some of the photos out of New York City are going to win Pulitzers this year. I guarantee it. People
Yeah,
hanging
definitely.
outside of bars with their masks hanging off their ears. And you know, listen, I'm not really here to point fingers either, but I think it's clear that when we talk about this reopening, as if everybody's going to follow all these rules, regulations, special, you know, special things put in place and precautions. It's just not the case. I mean, you go anywhere, especially, you know, people. I hear people in the city talk about how, you know, people in the city aren't wearing masks, and then you go outside to the suburbs, and certainly that's, you know. I was at Home Depot last week. There was a guy with a Trump hat just walking around, not even anything in the cart. Just you
Yeah.
know, hey, look at me. You know, you know, no mask, the whole deal, defiant. So it's going to be a tough road, I think.
I mean, the polls have been pretty clear that most people support staying at home, right? Most people support social distancing, wearing masks, doing whatever they can to do to like bring this virus to heel, to, you know, in the interest of public health and the interest of their own health and safety and their families. I wonder why we're rushing to reopen as much as we are in Massachusetts. We're a state that's been pretty good with doing everything, all of the above. Although I must say that Governor Baker, we got to ding him for waiting too long to shut the state down. It could have happened 2 or 3 weeks earlier. There are studies out now nationally showing that we would have had a lot less deaths and a lot less people getting sick if we, you know, shut down by early March, and we shut down more like in mid-March. And now we're already opening up again. I think they really should have waited till June, like some of the experts were saying, but we'll see. Yeah.
And restaurants aren't open, and you know, but we'll see what the beaches look like this weekend. But I'll tell you, you know, look at what
Yeah.
people are saying. You know, the not so creative right is calling him Governor Faker and such, and I think there's going to be a lot of intentional defiance, if you will, that of course puts other people at risk. So I'll be home this weekend.
I don't think that's, well, me too, but I don't think that that's what made the governor move. I think the heads of certain industries, and I think we'll find out which ones as time goes on, pressured him. You know, I don't think that the numbers of protesters, you know, the largely, you know, like hard right-wing protesters that we saw up at the State House, you know, very small numbers, certainly compared to all kinds of other protests we see up there. And some protests elsewhere in the state that were also very small and had a lot of the usual suspects from hard right organizations. I don't think that's what made Baker and the government move. I think that the answer can be seen in the reopening commission, which had no labor representation on it whatsoever, no
Yeah,
workers. And
owners.
as we're reopening, you know, we'll talk about this more. We don't have to talk about all of
No,
this now, but I mean, unless there's protections for the workers being asked to go out and be on the new front lines at restaurants and bars and stuff, I don't think this is being done right. You know, so what can I
well,
say?
in that case, you know, one of the big criticisms, of course, always is that health experts are not always taken into consideration, and we happen to have one here with us. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Okay. So I think now we're going to move on to our first interview for today. We'd like to welcome, we'll just wait till we see her on screen here and then we'll welcome her. But I'll predicate, oh, there she is. All right.
Here I am.
Hi, so this is Susan Wright-Thomas, and you are a Cambridge Health Alliance nurse in Cambridge, Mass. Is that correct, Susan?
Yes, I'm a registered nurse. I have worked at Cambridge Hospital for almost 30 years now. I have been a registered nurse on psychiatry and for the last 20 years in the maternity service. I currently am not working. I I retired from the hospital, my full-time job at the hospital about 5 years ago, have since been working as a per diem nurse. That's someone who goes in every few days or a couple times a month and takes care of patients to help the regular staff have days off and to fill in when they need extra help. So I've been doing that, and I've also been teaching clinical nursing at the hospital to students at Mass General and Simmons College. So in September, right, in March, when we closed down, the students were no longer doing their clinicals at the hospital
Right.
because, of course, we needed to be safe. And I am in a higher risk group, so I have not
Right.
been there either. So I
But
spend
we,
most, yeah.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we asked you to come on today because we're hearing that Cambridge Health Alliance, like unfortunately many hospitals still, hospital networks, is 2 months into the shutdown in Massachusetts. And with cases in Massachusetts since at least February, if not before, is still not providing its staff, its frontline staff, nurses, doctors, mid-levels, with and other staffers with personal protective equipment in sufficient quantities. Is that correct?
Right. It's not necessarily the right equipment in the right places, is really what I would say at this point. Things have improved quite a bit. But again, it really depends upon who you are, where you are. As you undoubtedly know, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which is the authority on how we should manage PPE and many other issues in the hospital, has had a lot of change in it. And the recommendations have changed quite a bit over the time that we started this pandemic and to where we are now. And so, however, we have found, the nurses anyway, we have found that the hospital, while meeting CDC requirements and sometimes exceeding them, actually, for some of us, does not do what we think is really the safest and what's needed for the frontline staff. For example, when the pandemic first started, we knew right off that we should all be wearing N95 respirators.
Right.
The hospital kept insisting that surgical masks were okay unless we were working with COVID patients, and they assured us that they really worked hard to identify them, which they did. But at the time, we didn't know, and we fairly quickly found out that COVID could be presenting in patients who didn't show symptoms. So actually, many of my coworkers were exposed to patients who later turned out to be COVID positive.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, right. So they were working at that time without the appropriate PPE. Many of my coworkers actually supplied their own masks and were told to take them off. We're told they couldn't wear them because it might frighten the patients or it was too concerning. So we actually had actions where nurses just plain refused to take off masks. As I said, things have gotten much better now, although there are still nurses working in the outpatient departments who have fairly close contact with patients who are not being issued N95s. Our big issue right now is that our N95s are being cleaned, decontaminated. However,
Somerville at that company, is that where it's happening or what?
well, actually, no, they aren't being, at this time, as far as we know, they are not being cleaned over there. They're not being cleaned with hydrogen peroxide. They are being cleaned with ultraviolet light, which,
Oh, yeah.
may get everything, may not. And a regular decay process where you just let the mask sit for 5 days and the virus dies on the mask. So, we really believe, and all of the evidence that we have available to us, and the Massachusetts Nurses Association and other our countrywide contacts have done a lot of research on this and done a lot of looking at it. We really believe there is no safe, proven decontamination process, and that we need a clean, unused N95 mask at minimum. That's a minimum standard.
For one day, or I remember in the old days it was like per patient, I think,
right,
sometimes, right?
exactly.
And they kept changing the standards nationally. Oh, now it's a day, now it's a week.
Right,
And
right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah. And the Cambridge Health Alliance keeps saying, well, we exceed CDC guidelines. Well, yeah, they do. But that doesn't mean that we have the appropriate equipment or that we're safe.
So this week, just to wrap up, I mean, you're a union nurse. Nurses are unionized with Mass Nurses Association over at CHA. What did union nurses do this week to take action on these issues?
Right. So that's our main issue. And what we did was we held a press conference. Actually, we've been concerned about this for some time. So we circulated a petition calling for the appropriate PPE for occupational presumption that anyone who contracted COVID did so at work, and also for the consideration of hazard pay. Yep. And the hazard pay really comes about because we don't have the appropriate PPE and we don't have the hazard, the assumption that our exposures are at work. We're being told that our exposures could most likely be community acquired. And, that just doesn't make sense to us. It's just not fair. So we circulated the petition. We had 72% of the healthcare workers and the nurses that we represent signed the petition. And we brought it to the chief nursing officer and demanded an audience with the chief executive officer, which was denied twice. And so we held a press conference to make this known.
And so far, you haven't gotten any positive response. We're going to have to wrap up now, but
yeah. Oh boy, that's fast. Yeah,
I take it that
the response has not been positive, and we've been told that none of our demands can be met. That the hospital just is incapable of doing it, and not only are we not happy with that, we're not happy with the fact that Cambridge Health Alliance is busy telling everybody else in the world that they meet and exceed all these requirements. And we think our public should know.
Well, we'll continue to follow this up. And, we thank you very much, Susan Wright-Thomas, Cambridge Health Alliance nurses, representing Cambridge Health Alliance nurses today with Mass Nurses Association, for being with us. So we'll, hope to have you on again and see how things go. Now I'm going to kick it right over to Chris Faraone. He's got presidential candidate Vermin Supreme.
It's funny. The last time I saw Vermin Supreme was during the, we were up in New Hampshire for the primary, and who knew that COVID-19 was coming? But of course, Vermin Supreme, someone we've been covering at DigBoston for many years. This year, he's running for president as a Libertarian, which has been interesting. He's actually gotten quite a bit of traction. And, we're going to check in. He's first, of course, it goes without saying, Vermin Supreme is the candidate of cleanliness. He always has been. Mandatory toothbrushing has been key to his platform for a generation. So as soon as we get Vermin on here, we're going to rap about that. Look at that. And there's the cleanliness we speak of. Vermin, thanks for coming, man. How's it going?
Bod looks like. That's yeah. I am doing very well. Thank you very much. This is the weekend of the Libertarian Party National Convention. And how's the sound? It's coming through okay?
Yeah, fantastic, man. So, I
Okay,
have to
good.
ask though, when you saw this all happening, you've always been preaching about, washing hands and, we can talk about ponies later, but really, did this seem
Sure.
like something that was right in your wheelhouse that you were going to kind of grab onto and, ride to November?
I had no idea. Obviously, if somebody had told me just like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, the last election cycle, that in 2020 I would be a viable candidate who's in the top tier of candidates in the third biggest party in America, I would not have really believed it. But it was over a year and a half ago. Of course, for 30 years I've been running my satirical humor campaign, but these actual libertarians from Texas, my campaign manager, Desiree, reached out and wanted to know, Vermin, would you be interested in running a serious campaign? And I had to give it some very serious thought because, of course, it would require such a time commitment. And in fact, once I agreed to do it, I was for 4 months, I was gone every weekend to a different state convention. I've participated in dozens of debates. I've had to, modify my strategy, because of course, normally I would have wanted to be on the New Hampshire primary ballot, but I had to forego that because the Libertarians did not want a fusion candidate. And some states have a ballot thing called sore loser laws. And if you run under one party, they won't let you run under another party in the general. So in order to
Or loser law.
not risk, yes, it is a shame. But it's been just an amazing year. The level of support that I've gotten, the endorsements that I've received. I've had endorsements from the former executive director of the House Republican Liberty Caucus. I've got the endorsement of a volunteer fire department in New Hampshire. It's just been really crazy. I never expected it to go, get this real, quite frankly. I mean, it's like I have more. It's a new character that I've had to develop.
Everybody hates Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So I mean, what does Vermin Supreme do to kind of to bring it home? What's your main message right now? When people are at home, they're looking to you. You're all over social media. You're someone a lot of people look up to. What are you?
Well,
what are you going to deliver?
I think in the COVID crisis, I know a lot of people are looking towards me for leadership, and of course, I've promised that if I am elected, I will make COVID-19 against the law.
Ooh.
I will create COVID-free zones because the COVID-free zone it would work like any we'd keep it keeps out the guns and the drugs, so that'd work. I think I might go back in time and kill baby COVID, and I believe that there's a very real possibility that I will try and build a microscopic antibacterial, antiviral wall around America, followed up by a moat full of hand sanitizer. So that's of course that's some of that famous Vermin Supreme satire and humor that the kids love. Otherwise, I just get to be another boring old guy.
I know,
but of course,
yeah. So tell us, who's your main rival? Who's your main rival, Vermin? And how can people? Are there any debates left? What do people do? They want to check this out at this stage.
Last night was the last debate. I mean, there are so many debates that you can actually watch that are online at all the various state conventions. I've had the pleasure when Justin Amash entered the race. He did one debate, and I was lucky enough to qualify for that one. And just and a funny thing. Let me tell you this really weird thing about how I've had to adjust is at some point during the year, the debates started putting out anti-novelty headwear rules. And so they would not let me debate with the novelty headwear. There was another candidate, Dan Taxation is Theft Berman, and he had a big yellow hat. So he was also affected by this rule. And at first I was like, oh yeah, well, screw you. I don't need you. And then I got to the point where it's like, okay, no big deal. And it has given me an opportunity to, become a different type of communicator. It's almost a different type of character in a way, and that it's, serious Vermin. And I'm sort of shilling for the Libertarian Party. I sync with their platform very well. I'm a left anarchist libertarian, rainbow anarchist libertarian. And the interesting thing, a thing that people don't always understand, is the Libertarian Party is not this right-leaning monolith. I think that's a common misconception. It was my misconception for a long time. But it's actually, there's a left-right dynamic. There is even, in fact, a Libertarian Socialist caucus within the Libertarian Party, in addition to a number of other caucuses. And I've had the endorsement from the LibSoc caucus. I've been endorsed by the Pro-Life caucus. And so it's a party that's made up of all these different caucuses representing different political stripes. And
so if anybody wants to get involved at this point,
at this point, I think,
what are they doing? Where are they coming to see you?
At this point, you can keep looking at my campaign. Verminsupreme2020.com is my official campaign website. You should check out my actual policies, which are based on the Libertarian Party platform at inonthejoke.net. And if you wanted to, I think if you're not familiar with the Libertarian Party platform, I would like you to read it. It's lp.org/platform, because it is my belief that if you're going to represent a party, then you should represent what they stand for, and that is ultimately encapsulated in their platform. And so that's what I've been pushing forward, as in addition to the zombies and the ponies and time travel, of course, because that is the sizzle. That is the thing that has brought me this incredible level of notoriety that I'm able to make a legitimate offer to the Libertarian Party. Now I can say, well, yes, I have to I have a magic boot. This magical boot has allowed me to exponentially amplify my free speech voice. It has allowed me to communicate with millions of people across the globe. It has allowed me to interface and communicate with media from around the flat earth. And so it's the magic of the boot. It's the whole character that people seem to love. I've managed to build up this reservoir of political goodwill and political capital that I'm happy to spend a little bit on bringing people's eyeballs towards this, what I believe is a feasible third party. It's a party of principle. It's a party of ideas. We've attracted a lot of, we saw each other at the primary, and you saw the amounts of love I was getting from all the Bernie bros and the Tulsi kids. And, it was really great. And the Yang Gang. And we've a lot of those people have gravitated towards my campaign, even though ultimately, their understanding of their political being it doesn't totally sync up with the libertarian culture per se. We have some policy differences. But even when I asked Tulsi Gabbard herself, have you read the Libertarian Party platform? She said no, but she then pivoted to this impassioned anti-war and pro-civil liberties rant. So she understood instinctively some of the things that we have in common, and some of the other things we can work on for sure.
Excellent. Vermin Supreme, everybody. He's not Joe Biden and he's not Donald Trump. And I
have neither of those people.
Neither.
And if I receive the nomination, let me tell you this: we are going to have the biggest, the wackiest, the craziest, the most informational, educational, and entertaining darn campaign that this country has ever seen. And not only that, but you will, if you're lucky, get that free pony. I'm President Vermin Supreme. We begin bombing Narnia in 5 minutes.
Looking forward to it. Thanks a lot, Vermin. See you, man. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. I guess we're going to wrap it up for this week. Stay tuned. Be safe on Memorial Day. We'll see you next week.
See you, folks.